We need to understand two rules before we start simplifying surds. The first one is the multiplication rule, which says if we have the root of a, assuming it's a surd, we multiply it with the root of b, assuming it's also a surd. It's just the same as taking a multiplied by b, then we put the root. So let's try an example for this rule. If we have the root of 2 to represent, of course, the root of a, then we multiply it with the root of 3 to represent the root of b. It's just the same as saying 2 multiplied by 3, then we put the root. But you see, 2 multiplied by 3 is 6. So this is just the same as saying the root of 6. That's the multiplication rule. The next one is the division rule. And the division rule says if we have the root of a, assuming it's a surd, and then we have the root of b, assuming it's also a surd, it's just the same as saying a divided by b, then we put the root. Let's try it with an example. So let's say we have the root of 72 divided by the root of 2. This is just the same as saying 72 divided by 2. Here where 72 represents the a, then 2 represents the b, but then we put the root like that. But you see, 72 divided by 2 is 36. So this is just the same as saying the root of 36. But the root of that 6 has an exact square root, so the square root of the 6 is 6. So this is just the same as 6. And that's a division rule. With those two rules, we can be able to simplify our surds. So let's try some examples. Let's say you are told to simplify the following surd, then you are given the root of 200. The first thing you need to do with this one, you need to write 200 in its factor form. So to do so, I just need to look for the numbers which when I multiply them, they'll give me 200. And the first one is of course 100 multiplied by 2 is 200. And you can pick others like 50 multiplied by 4 is 200, and so on. 25 by 8 is still 200, then 20 by 10 is 200, 14 by 5 is still 200. And then, after you get the factors, you need to identify one which has the highest value with an exact square root. For example, in this case, 25 and 8, 25 has an exact square root because the square root of 25 is 5. But also, 100 has an exact square root because the square root of 100 is 10. So, between 25 and 100, because they are the whole ones here with which have an exact square root, all the others don't have, except this 4, but 4 is too small, we can just ignore it. We need the ones which are the biggest. So in this case, 100 is bigger than 25, so we go with this 100 by 2 as the factors of 200. So with that, we eliminate all the others. So we always look for the highest number which can have an exact square root. So now we have 100 by 2 as our factors. Of course, they will total to 200. Then from there, we go next and say, of course, we apply the root because we said 100 by 2 is 200, but we need to apply the root because here we had the root. So it becomes the root of 100 multiplied by the root of 2. Then from there, we already know the square root of 100 is 10. So then it means the square root of 100 is 10, but the square root of 2 will remain to be 2 because 2 doesn't have an exact square root. Then from there, we need to apply this rule. A multiplied by the root of b is just equivalent to a root b, where in this case, a will be the value we got after getting the square root of the number which is the exact square root, in this case 100, which was 10. So here a will be 10, then the root of b will now be the number which doesn't have an exact square root, in this case the root of 2. So now the answer would be equal to 10 the root of 2, like this. 10 multiplied by the root of 2 is the same as 10 root of 2. So now 200, the root of 200 reduces to 10 root of 2. And we have simplified this side here. So can we try another example? So in this side we are told to simplify the root of 12 multiplied by the root of 75. And as usual, let's start with the root of 12. The root of 12, we can write 12 in its factor form. So the root 12 itself is the same as 4 multiplied by 3, which is 12, 6 by 2 is 12, 12 by 1 is also 12. But you see, all these others here, they don't have a value which have an exact square root. So 6 doesn't have an exact square root, 2 doesn't, 12 doesn't, and then 1 doesn't. But you see, this 4 has an exact square root because the square root of 4 is 2. Then multiplied by 3. So we go with these factors. It's just the only highest factors which at least one of the values of a number which has an exact square root. So now we go with those 2 becomes 4 by 3, which is of course 12. But you see, in 12 we had the root. So we put, of course, the root. So the root of 4 multiplied by the root of 3. Then from there, we already know the root of 4, or the square root of 4 is 2. But the square root of 3 remains the same because it is a surd and it cannot be simplified further. And then we apply our rule where we said a multiplied by the root of b is the same as a root of b, where a is the value of the number which had the exact square root, in this case 2, and then the root of b is the root of 3. So now it becomes the root of b, which is 2 root of 3. So that becomes the answer for this part here. Keep it in mind, we will use it. Then we'll go back to the root of 75. Of course, the first thing is to write the root of 75. Of course, the 75 itself in its factor form. And the first one, we can say 25 by 3 is 75, of course. 15 by 5 is 75, 75 by 1 is 75. But you see, this one, this one, this one, and this one don't have an exact square root. And the only value here with an exact square root is this 25 here. So we multiply it by 3, we get 75. So all others don't have exact square root. So we remove them, we just remain with 25 by 3. So now that we remain with 25 by 3, we just apply the square root because here we had the root. So it becomes the square root of 25 multiplied by the square root of 3, which of course 25 by 3 is 75. And from there, you see the square root of 25 is 5. It has an exact square root. But the root of 3 is not an exact square root, therefore we don't simplify it, it just remains as the same. Then we apply our rule where we said a multiplied by the root of b is equivalent to a root of b, where in this case a would be 5, then the root of 3 of course will be the root of b. So in this case it means the root of 75 is just the same as 5 is 5 the root of 3. Now we have the one for 75 and previously we had the one for 12. So now we combine them so that we can multiply. So now it becomes the root of 2 root of 3, which was for 12, multiplied by 5 root of 3, which was the root for 75. So from there, we apply the multiplication rule. And we said in the multiplication rule, if we have the root of a, which in this case would be the root of 3, then we multiply by the root of b, which in this case would still be the root of 3 again here. Then it's just the same as taking this a multiplied by b, then we apply the root. So in this case, 3 multiplied by 3, then we apply the root. So it becomes the root of 3 multiplied by the root of 3 is just the same as 3 multiplied by 3, then we apply the root. 3 by 3 is 9, then the root, and the square root of 9 is 3. But you see, after getting these 3, we also had 2 and 5. So we are not touch them. So we take 2 multiplied by 5 and now multiplied by 3, the 3 which came after simplifying these 2 surds here. So now it becomes 2 multiplied by 5, then multiplied by 3. And then 2 multiplied by 5 is 10, then 10 multiplied by 3 is 30. And then becomes the answer 4, the root of 12, multiplied by the root of 75. And that's how we simplify surds. If you have any question or there is a place you did not understand, you can ask me in the comment section. I try my level best to answer. And bye for now. Let us meet in the next lesson. Now I'm going to explore a different concept in mathematics.